Okay, the recording is working. So we should probably get started. Tim, what are the agenda items that did people write anything in the doc?
The first one that I wrote down was our bug count is way too high. It's been creeping up across the 1.8 release. Some of those issues that have been cropping up have been multiple reported across a couple of release cycles now. That's not a definitive list. You have to do a couple of different queries. I'll paste the query into the channel too as well for folks who are not looking at the doc. But currently there's like 25 open bugs, but some of them are pretty nasty if you actually look into them. I started digging into a couple of them, but I haven't enough time to dig into them. And it'd be nice. I sent a couple of emails to the list too, but I don't think we had any takers to start to burn down that bug list. But we should probably also do like a triage as well to prioritize this at some point. I don't know if we want to do it. Maybe next meeting, we could have like a walkthrough on what are the higher priority ones.
Yeah, maybe you and I could do a preliminary triage and then vet that with the team. Maybe Bobby would like to help out. I don't know. And then vet that with the SIG at the next meeting, as opposed to just doing the actual prioritization in the meeting. That's an alternative. But either way, I agree we should discuss it soon, like at the next meeting.
Yep. So that's just the kind of PSA, and we should probably work more on that, especially for the next cycle. The other thing is that I put in there, I think, was 1.9 features. Let's start to talk about the 1.9 feature list.
Right. So I saw one person sent email. I think Kevin said he was interested in doing some more work on the what's now called the descheduler. But that since that's in an incubator, I don't know that it's tied to a release, which he also pointed out in his email. But I don't think he had much detail on what he wanted. Did you see that email, Tim?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't remember detail on what he wanted to do with it, but I remember he just said he was interested in working on it.
I think it can be handled within that incubator repo.
Yeah, right? I agree. Bobby's on I think Bobby, I know maybe he wants to say what he was planning to work on. I know he was planning to do some work on the priority preemption, and then also we have the resource quota changes to incorporate priority that are going through the community. Bobby, do you want to say something about those?
Sure, yeah. So basically the plan is for 1.9 to add scheduling by priority so that higher priority pending pods are scheduled before the lower priority ones. This is needed to address a problem that could cause starvation of higher priority pods when we preempt pods. So basically, if we preempt something and lower priority pods at the time that those preempted pods go away are in the head of the queue, scheduling queue, then they may get scheduled before the higher priority pod that initiated the preemption. So in order to solve this problem, we are changing the scheduler pending queue to sort pods by priority and add some logic to account for the amount of resources that those preempters need. So it's mostly in my first proposal on preemption. I will probably write another design doc and address this specifically. We also need to add support for pod disruption budget during preemption. Another item that I'm considering for preemption is to support interpod affinity on lower priority pods. Basically, if a pod has affinity on a lower priority pod, we don't support it properly in preemption. We are going to consider supporting it in 1.9, But at the moment, we're not so sure if we are going to actually implement it due to the possibility of having a high overhead. Anyways, other items for 1.9.
One question I have regarding this preemption you were talking about. I think just one scenario like I was having in mind. Let's say like there is like one higher priority pod on a node and there is one lower priority pod on a node, but somehow the higher priority pod has stopped honoring its node affinity for whatever reason. Maybe node labels were changed or tags were changed. So would you consider preempting that higher priority pod in that case instead of the lower priority pod that is still maintaining its node affinities?
No, we don't. There might be some of these niche cases, but we generally do not. Well, depends on what you exactly mean, but generally we do not preempt any pod higher priority than a pending pod, if that's the question. So it was not very clear from your question when you were saying a higher priority pod, whether you mean higher priority compared to a pending pod that we would like to schedule, or higher priority compared to some other pods.
I mean higher priority than the already existing lower priority pod that is already running.
So, but still lower, this higher priority pod still has a lower priority compared to the pending pod, right?
Actually, I don't know, like in this question, whether it matters what is the priority of pending pod. I mean, I'm just saying like there are two pods, one is high priority and one is lower priority that are running on a node, but higher priority pod has stopped honoring its node affinities, but the lower priority pod that is running that hasn't. But what is the this higher priority, lower priority? I mean, I'm not saying they like what is their relative priority with respect to the pending. Maybe both might be higher. I mean, both this higher priority and lower priority pods might have higher priority than the pending priority pod, pending pod.
Yeah. So today we never preempt a higher priority pod. So no matter what conditions exist, we never preempt a pod with a higher priority than the pending pod. And we are probably not going to change that, at least in 1.9.
Does that answer your question, Navesh?
Yeah, it answers, but I mean, I was wondering like why not to do preempt higher priority in that case instead of lower priority, if like, because that seems more potential candidate for preemption because it does not anyway honor its. But anyway, like I mean,
so you're saying just so I understand, like you're saying like placing the pending pod on that node would allow the running pod to have its pod affinity be satisfied. Is that the scenario?
No. What I'm saying, let's say there are two pods that are running on a node. One pod is higher priority. Let's say two pods A and B. A has higher priority than B, and there is another pod C that is pending. But both A and B have higher priority than C. My question is like as Bobby explained, like whatever way they are calculating which pod to preempt, it seems the pod B would be preempted. What I'm saying, why not preempt pod A if it has stopped honoring its node affinities for whatever reason, like let's say node labels were changed or node tags were changed. Why to preempt pod B? Why not preempt pod A?
I see.
What I said first of all was that we are not going to preempt any of the A or B because C, which is the pending pod, has lower priority than both of them, right?
Okay, sorry. What I mean to, let's say C has higher priority than both A and B. Okay. Let's put it that way. Yeah, sorry.
I see. We still don't preempt. We still don't preempt pod A because A is we still don't preempt A, and we may preempt B because B has a lower priority. That's our first metric to find what is the sort of like most probable candidate for preemption. But if pod C somehow needs pod B to be present, for example, pod C has an affinity interpod affinity on pod B, then we
Yeah.
are going to keep B and well.
Yeah. That is different scenario. I mean, yeah. I mean, I agree with that. That is different scenario. Maybe. But
Yeah, I think Avesh, maybe let me see if this is another way of saying it without the ABC. People might be lost. So it sounds like you're saying if you have a pod that's running on a node and its pod affinity is no longer satisfied, we should give
node
it.
affinity.
I'm
Node
sorry.
affinity.
Oh, it's a node. It's node affinity.
Yeah.
Wait.
Or maybe you could take like pod. I mean, anything like it could be node affinity and pod affinity. My question is
Like
there.
You should effectively lower its priority. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, maybe
Like
like
treat it as a lower priority pod because it's not happy running there anymore.
yeah, exactly.
And so you should make it more likely to be preempted and the way you would do that in the mechanism and rules that we have today would be by effectively treating it as having a lower priority. So I think that the kind of the vision for what we had for that approach, and maybe it's kind of arbitrary, but was to have the rescheduler or the descheduler or whatever you want to call it handle those scenarios. So like if there are pods that are running and their node affinity or pod affinity is no longer satisfied, you can have the descheduler. And one of the advantages of that is that, for example, like preemption does not take pod disruption budget into account. Like it's a factor, but it can violate pod disruption budget. We decided that when we had the design review. But you could have a rule that the descheduler always respects pod disruption budget. And and so in that scenario, like in the scenario you described, probably you do want to respect pod disruption budget, because although it would be nice to move that pod somewhere else because it's not really happy where it's running, you probably don't want to do that if it would violate the pod disruption budget, because that would be even worse. And so I think the logic for what you're talking about, probably it's reasonable, but it probably should go in the descheduler as opposed to
actually I think next we are going to have that in descheduler, right?
Yes, and as David said, another important thing for us is that we cannot really spend a whole lot of time in preemption, because preemption is right in the critical path of scheduling. Yeah. So we cannot spend too much time, and one of the reasons that we haven't added support for affinity on lower priority pods is exactly because of this problem that we cannot, our affinity predicate, interpod affinity predicate, is one of those slowest pods, is the slowest basically predicate. We cannot really run that predicate many times to find all the possible pods that could satisfy affinity of a penny pod. So that's why we're not supporting it. We should be careful about the performance implications of this. So descheduler would be a better place for.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, just wanted to bring it up. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and we should kind of keep a list of what kinds of policies we think the descheduler should enforce, and ideally people should be able to enable and disable whichever policies they want, like the cluster admin, because some people might want these things, some people might not, and so on. But I think it's a good question. Yeah. Sorry, Bobby, were you? I think you were in the middle of.
I guess I covered all the items which might be of interest to the community.
Do you think you could add more detail in the doc, as well as possible links to issues that are currently there? That would be helpful.
I haven't created issues particularly for these couple of features that I talked about, but I will create separate issues for them.
And I think, Bobby, you said you were going to write a doc describing the plan for addressing, I can't remember if it was for addressing all three of the things you mentioned or just the pod affinity and the starvation, but I think you were planning to do that, right?
Yes, so I'm going to, as I said, the starvation problem that I mentioned is already in my first design proposal on preemption. But despite that, I'm going to write a separate doc covering that area again and add, I mean, pod disruption budget doesn't really need another design.
Yeah.
It's kind of obvious, but I will also touch on the idea of supporting inter-pod affinity on lower priority pods as well in that design doc.
Does it make sense to expand the existing document that's there? It's already merged, right? Or does it make sense to have a separate doc then link to it? Because right now, scanning through topic areas is actually quite difficult for people to reason about unless they've been in the project. So if I wanted to understand priority preemption, I would have to scan multiple docs then to get an understanding of it.
Yeah, so what I will probably do, if David agrees as well, is that I will probably start a Google Docs on these two ideas, and then once we reach to an agreement, I can merge it back to the same GitHub document on preemption.
That sounds like a great idea. I like it.
And then we have the adding priority to the resource quota. I think that proposal is close to being merged, and I think I can't remember who is working on it, but I assume they will be implementing it in 1.9. Bobby, do you remember doing that?
Yes. So Harry Zhang is working on it. The proposal is already there, and I think we agreed on it, but Derek had some objections. I tried to ping Derek after we tried to address his concerns, but he hasn't gotten back to us in the past couple of weeks. All
right, maybe try pinging him again. You have his direct email address at Red Hat?
I tried Slack, but
okay, well, you might want to email him directly. I can give you his email address if you don't have it.
Okay. Even I can talk to him regarding that.
Okay, yeah, Vesh, that would be great. Yeah, I think we responded, or Bobby responded to his concerns there adequately, but we should make sure he's satisfied with them.
Yeah, I'll talk to him.
Okay, cool. Was there other stuff people were planning to do in 1.9?
There's a couple of the component config work. There's a large PR from Dan Mace that came in to refactor how the configuration is done for initialization of the scheduler. And that falls in line with the proxy and the other grand config work that's going on, grand unified config. So I am on the hook to do a review for that. I think Bobby's on that PR too as well. It's pretty large. You might want to take a look too, David.
Yeah, that's among very many things that I need to look at this week. So I will try.
So that's making the scheduler be configured using component config. Is that what that does?
It's more than that. It's like the unification of how the configuration is supposed to look like. Because right now it's kind of a sloppy mess, and some of the work that was done in the kube proxy serves as the example of what we wanted to do across the system. And I know that the kubelet had followed some of that. I don't know if it's not all implemented or not, but the idea is to move into a more unified way to pass a configuration file to whatever component it may be and have it start up in a cleaner fashion. Because right now we have way too many config knobs, right? And to have it just pushed into configuration files where possible. But there's a problem with the scheduler in the fact that it has two separate. It has a static initialization config and it has a dynamic config, and we need to make sure that we're mindful of that bit.
Yeah, I think that's kind of by design, right? We kind of wanted some of the flags to be at startup time and some to be like the policy. I assume that's what you're alluding to, right? Like we wanted like the policies to be. That was the work Bobby had done some like several quarters ago to configure the policy, like the weights and the policies that are enabled. I mean, is that the what you're referring to? How that about there being two?
Yes. But his is to put it into one. I need to evaluate and take a look at it. I know it's on my radar of things to do, but I haven't gotten to it yet. But that's one of the areas.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it, so I'm just trying to piece it together from what you're saying. Like, if you're saying that there's a proposal to combine those two kinds of config for the scheduler, I'm not sure that's a great idea, because we probably want like some of those, like imagine a hosting provider like OpenShift Online or GKE or something like that. Like they may want to have control over the API server endpoint or some of these config options, but then let the cluster admin, the end user cluster admin, control like the scheduling policies and weights and stuff like that. And the split we have today allows that. And if we combine it into a single object, I don't know how we can easily like have the permissions be set in the right way. Do you see what I'm saying?
I'm totally in agreement. I think we just need to take a look at that PR, have more eyes on it is all I'm saying, really.
Okay.
I will link the PR. It's in the doc, and I will put it in the chat window right now.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if we have people from the community that want to get involved and get up to speed on things. I don't know if you've had other people pinging you about, nope.
Unfortunately, no. I mean, we've had highly variable engagement from the community in the scheduling area. And most recently we had folks like Harry and Klaus, but we can try to contact them if we want to, see what they're interested in doing. But nobody has been pinging me offline or anything about getting involved.
Everyone wants to add a feature. No one wants to clean the mess.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Can you all hear me?
Very
Yes.
little. If you could speak up, that would help.
Hey, sorry, this is Jay. So I'm actually very much interested in helping clean up mess and not feature stuff. And I just wanted to ask the bug list that Tim, that you put a list to in the chat earlier. How do you recommend sort of collating those, or I guess triaging those, if I was to look for something that I can contribute a fix for? I see that a number of them are already assigned to someone. Should I just avoid anything that's already assigned to someone? Is there, I don't know, is there a particular area I should avoid, or?
I think one thing that we haven't done is assign priorities. And you can always just ask if the person's actively working on something. Like the scheduler dies because the scheduler cache is corrupted, the one that I'm assigned on. That has occurred multiple times, and that's a big problem. And I'd be happy to hand it over if you want to dig into that. But that's also a very thorny issue.
Okay, so you're just saying I should, if I have questions, just ask them on the particular issues and see if whoever is still working on it?
Yep, absolutely. Okay. And I think what we'll probably do before the next meeting, or I hope we can do before the next meeting, is to at least assign general weights to the backlog that exists there, so we have a handle on at least what are the P0 items that should be addressed first.
Cool. That would be definitely useful for newcomers.
Yeah, please feel free to jump in. As you can tell, we have more problems than people, and don't be afraid if there's somebody already assigned. Just say something on the issue that you're interested in it, and yeah.
And I will be happy to help as well. I will be happy to tell you if any of these problems are serious enough to work on, or what is the priority. I can also help giving you some information about how to proceed. Fixing
cool.
It.
Thank you, guys.
So anything else you want to talk about? It sounds like we won't be having a lot in 1.9. But if we can maybe, work on this bug, getting this bug list down in 1.9, that would be fantastic. I know other SIGs at some points have had stability only releases, or at least have claimed to have stability only releases. We're not, I guess, doing that officially, but if we only have like 1 or 2 features, this would be a great opportunity for people to work on the bugs.
Yeah. Also, I would like to add that kind of like in the same, aligned with the same topic that we were talking about, like bugs. We've seen a lot of test failures. Most recent one was another failure that I just submitted a PR today. Well, I saw the PR yesterday and I fixed it today. So we keep seeing a bunch of these E2E tests failing. I converted a couple of them in a previous release to integration tests. Some of them were failing because of the fact that our test clusters were not set up to be consistent enough, sort of. So those are converted. But we've seen also some other issues like the tests themselves are not written in a robust way. I changed one of them, which was failing and causing a release block. So we probably need to revisit some of our E2E tests again and look at the flaky ones and try to address those as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. Anything else? Tim, did you have anything else?
Nope.
Okay, I guess we're done.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.